Mr. Rothgi has also created a space of Beyond IIT where he helps students realize that one's potential isn't defined by a degree. He has a product management newsletter where he talks about career management and product management and talks about various interesting developments in the field. He enjoys public speaking and has delivered talks across colleges. And it is our pleasure to be able to host him today and learn from him today. We welcome you, sir, and the stage is all yours.
I think you can hear me now, right?
Yes, sir.
And you can see my screen.
Yes, sir.
Great. So I'm not as impressive as Ananya made it out to be. And I hope if you reach out to me, you won't call me sir. My name is Anubhav, and I'm far less talented than most of you. I have a fake MBA. I didn't go to an IIM or an IIT. So I've sort of scrapped through and learned a bunch of things through first principles. And that's what I want to share with you today. So again, you know who I am. So why should you listen to me? I mean, this is the most important question that you should answer at the beginning of every presentation. What is it that the audience is going to gain from this presentation, and why should I give a shit or any other explicit word that you want to use at the end of that sentence, right? I think you should listen because you will learn a lot of tactics that are going to help you multiply your career earnings, right? Whatever you expect to make today, you can make a lot more if you listen carefully and you are asked the right questions and are able to implement some of the tactics that I'm going to lay out in this presentation. It's a very simple promise, and I hope to make sure that I deliver on that promise by the end of this presentation. And just to set the context of who I am, I'm born and brought up in Delhi, and I'm going to walk you through my career journey because it is instructive, and I think a lot of you will will think about, I hope all of you make a graph like this, right? And it doesn't have to be, climbing up a mountain like I've made it. It could be, you can use whatever metaphor you like, but you must have a narrative for your career. So I'm going to walk you through my narrative and hope that that's instructive and it helps you build your own narrative, right? I graduated, I did my high school in Delhi. I went to Modern School, Barakamba Road, one of the premier institutions in Delhi. I was very fortunate to go there. And I was not smart enough to get into an IIT. I knew that very quickly. And I didn't prepare for an IIT. I did well in my boards. And while my cousins were getting through IITs and other colleges, I went to Bharati Vidyapeeth College of Engineering in Pune. I think it was the worst engineering college in the world. Probably it is very hard to find a worse college in 1998 than where I went. And the first year, all of us were just trying to figure out, why are we here and don't we deserve better, right? And uh, because there were so many of us there who had, tried to give the JEE exam, twice or had dropped a single year or 2 years, and some of us had not dropped a year. We all realized that, look, it's okay. Now that we are here, let's try to make the most of it. But my joke is that, I did my master's just to finish my bachelor's because I didn't learn anything in my engineering college, right? And I thought for me to, be called an engineer, I have to finish my master's. And I was extremely fortunate that I got into University of Texas at Austin. It's one of the top 10 engineering colleges in the world. And I got in because I was different. And I would urge all of you to chase your own peculiar interests because that specific language, those peculiar interests, are going to help you figure out who you are and will help you stand out from the crowd of IIM graduates or the crowd of IIT graduates or the crowd of same people, you know. And my focus for my master's was acoustics and electronic music. I wanted to study music and I wanted to use technology to make music. And uh, in 1998, there weren't too many people like me, I think. And it was an interesting enough interest and pursuit that got me into the University of Texas. Now, you never know what works. This is my post facto analysis of the situation. But I know had the worst GRE score of anybody at University of Texas at Austin. So there was something else at play. It was not my academic brilliance that got me there. but anyhow, and I got married right after I graduated. I got married in 2002. My wife and I spent a year and a half in the US, but we wanted to move back to India. We wanted to be closer to our families. We wanted to raise our children in India so that they understood what being Indian meant, whatever that is, right? And we we're very happy we did that. When I came back in 2003, I was looking for a job in audio and video. I didn't have a job when I moved back to India. I think I got an offer from Bose to become a salesperson for them after a master's, right? And I was being paid 30,000 rupees a year. Sorry, a month. 30,000 a year to बहुत कम हो जाता है, but 30,000 a year a month. But fortunately, I also had a chance to apply at Adobe. They saw that I had done my master's from the US and maybe I knew something. So they interviewed me for a engineering role and they rejected me. They said, "Yeah, you can't code. तुम्हारे बस का नहीं है, and you find something else to do." So I tried again. No, I didn't try again. My last interview went well, and they said, "Well, would you like to become a program manager or a project manager instead of a developer?" So I took that on, and I tried to do the best that I could. So I would encourage all of you to do the best you can in whichever job you get. I try to expand the scope of that role. I try to use influence and build my influence within the company. So over time, I became a program manager. I manage a team of program managers. And then I realized project management is not a great role. You're mostly asking people for status and driving deadlines and not making decisions. So I wanted to move to a role that had more authority than just trying to do stuff through influence. So I uh, did a fake MBA. I call it my fake MBA. I did a part-time MBA from IIM Lucknow because it was easier to get to. Again, it was too hard for me. I tried the first time. I didn't make it. I got rejected in the group discussion round. And then I tried again and I got through because in the first group discussion, I just, shut everybody off and I said, no, now you talk and now you talk and now this person can talk. And that is obviously not how you run a group discussion, but I didn't know any better. So I did that and then I was able to, largely to the strengths of my relationship, move into a product management role. And since then, I've been able to do fairly well in that role. And I'll talk to you about, some of the things that have worked for me. But as you look at product management, I know this talk is about both product management and influence. The product management role is very different depending on what size of the company you are in. If you're in a company with thousands of people, your role is going to be very specialized and it's going to be very much about the core discipline of product management. If you're in a smaller company, your role will allow you to work in product management, maybe a little bit of product design, maybe a little bit on product marketing, maybe a little bit on customer research. And if you're in a startup, you're probably going to do a lot of those things. In fact, all of those things. So I would encourage starting from the bottom and going up if you can in your career journey rather than the other way around. I had this exposure when I was in Austin. I did a curricular practical training with a company called Nemesis Music Technologies. We were just 7 people in that company. So I also went and uh, participated in trade shows and demonstrated the product to customers and talked to them. And I was also writing code. And it really showed me sort of a more complete view of the software business, which I was able to use to my advantage because, like I said, I'm not the most technically savvy person, but I can put a lot of things together, right? I'm not that bad, but I'm not definitely not in the league of, star programmers. So I knew that for me to play to my strengths, I have to move to a customer facing role, which I did at my first job in Dolby Labs because when I joined that company, I realized that the work that they wanted me to do was didn't really require a master's, right? Anybody could do it. I don't know why I got that job after a master's. It was largely building a UI on top of somebody else's algorithms. And you will also face these challenges in your career. Just because you have an MBA from a reputed college doesn't mean that you will not be surprised by the lack of challenge in the roles that you may take on in your career. So if you do that, you need to start thinking about crafting your career, moving to the right roles, and all of that only happens by doing a great job in the role that you're in right now. because once you do that and you build credibility and rapport, you are able to then ask for more responsibilities. So the product management role is also changing over time, right? So if you're in a small company with a founder and a small engineering team and maybe a single designer, then you're doing a lot of work to get the word out about the product, get people to try the product, to understand what do customers want from the product. And as you move to a medium-sized company, you have a lot more support. You have more support from the design team. You maybe now have product support that is telling you the things that are that customers are complaining about. You have a dedicated QE team that is able to tell you if the product meets the specs that have been written. And over time, as you work in a larger company like Adobe, there are specialized roles for development, QE, project management. So you finally have project management support. So somebody else is tracking deadlines for you. You have a UX designer, you may have a visual designer, you may have a prototyper who is working with the designers to test the ideas before they're implemented. You may have UX research that allows you to meet with customers and get customer insights in a more scientifically validated manner than just you talking to a couple of customers, right? And then you as a product manager has to be the chief consolidation officer. I always say that the product manager is not the CEO of the product, but you're the chief consolidator and prioritization person for the product, because you're hearing from dev, they're saying, oh, all these things are broken. You're hearing from QE, all these things are broken. You're hearing from project management that these things can't be done in time. You're hearing from designers that they don't like what is being built and it needs to be prettier, faster, it needs to be easier. And UX researchers are telling you that actually customers want something entirely different than what you're building, right? And product marketing is saying what you're building is very hard to market. People are looking for something else, and product support is telling you what you've built is not working. So across all of these different channels, you have to figure out how are you going to make it all come together in a cohesive strategy around which you can tell a story. And then, depending on the size of the company you're in, the PM to QE ratio or the PM to the dev team ratio will also change, right? You may have one product manager for 10 people. When I started at Adobe in the product management team, I was a single product manager for 15 people, then a single product manager for 30 people, then a single product manager for 45 people. Obviously, what you will be able to do will be determined by how many product managers you have, right? So you only the highest priority things will bubble up to the top if you're the single product manager for a large organization versus if you have a smaller team to work with. So as the product management role changes, you and as you move from smaller companies to larger companies, you are going to move from a position of direct control to a position that requires you to influence a lot of people, because you are not a leader, right? Until you're able to influence people. And as a product manager, you're not going to lead by authority. Generally speaking, you're not going to lead by authority. And if you do, you're not going to make any friends and you're going to have a very limited, what should I say? You're going to have a very limited impact in a company if that's the only way you know how to lead. And as you move into larger roles, as you grow in your career, influencing others is going to be the key reason why you get promoted to larger roles, is going to be the key reason why you succeed where others don't, right? And there are many skills that you will need to develop to be able to influence at scale and to be able to get the most out of a diverse group of people and a diverse group of peers. What that means is that engineering managers, design managers, as well as product marketing managers are all your peers. You are not, none of them are reporting to you, right? Yet you have to make sure that they understand what is the vision of the product. Why is it that they should care about that vision? What does it mean for them individually? And how can their commitment to your vision lead to the outcomes that are critical for the business to succeed, right? So you have to get really good at telling a story that works for all these peers, all these stakeholders. You cannot tell them you do this because I'm asking you to do this. That doesn't work. And hopefully, you work in companies whose culture completely demolishes this authority driven leadership style, because that is generally a very toxic work culture and it doesn't allow you to grow. It doesn't allow you to become the best version of yourself. So you have to know how to influence. It is a must have skill, and this is not taught in any school, and it cannot be taught. It cannot be taught theoretically, right? And I'll talk about a little bit more about that later. Another reason why influence is important, because most if not all roles in any organization other than the founder CEO type roles are informal leadership roles, right? You have to find ways to lead without having the authority, and those are most of the roles that you're going to get for a long time in your career. If you join the workforce next year or this year, probably for the next 7 years, if not 10 years, you are going to be in influence roles. And if you move to an authority role, I hope you continue to lead by influence and not by authority, because that is going to set the right culture in your organizations and your teams. And your job is to change minds and inspire people. That is what leads to influence, right? That is what leads you to be seen as an influential person and a person deserving of leadership roles. And once you do that, you get greater commitment to your cause, you get greater results for the business, and you multiply your career earnings, like I said at the beginning of the presentation. I'm sure you've heard about this circle of influence thing, but this is I'm just expanding this a little bit more. There are things that are completely in your control, and then there are things that you need to influence that you control partially. There are many things that you might care about, but you are only consulted on. Decisions on those things are not made by you. And then there is another concentric circle out of that, which is stuff that you're just informed about, right? Where you are not really involved. Maybe politics is a good example of that, or maybe what's happening in the world and what's happening with green energy. Maybe you think about that, or maybe you worry about it a little bit, but you're not informed, but you're mostly informed by things that you want to read and things that you want to follow. So uh, what takes the most energy is the what do I influence and what do I care about circles, right? Things that are completely in your control, like how much you need to study, what work do you want to do in the next 1 hour, which presentation or webinar you want to attend. Those are very easy. They have no they are not taxing mentally. But things that you want to influence, they take a lot more time, they take a lot more strategic insights. They are things that you think about, you worry about at night sometimes, right? And so they take a lot more energy than things that you own. So you have to be very careful about what are the things you want to influence and what are the things you really want to be consulted about, because they will take a lot of energy for you to get them right. So don't just allow things to enter into these circles without these being conscious choices made by you. Right? So if there are things that you have to influence, remember that the time commitment and the mental cost of influence will be paid by you. So be very careful about what is in each circle. And obviously, influence is not manipulation. I'm not going to spend any more time on that. But an important thing that I hinted 2 slides ago was that influencing can't be learned theoretically, right? You cannot learn how to swim by watching YouTube videos. Similarly, you can't learn how to influence just by hearing me talk or by hearing some professor talk about, influence, right? it is a muscle that you have to develop. You have to go to the gym to build muscle. Similarly, you have to practice a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about in the next few slides to build a strong muscle around influence, right? And influence is important in any career. It is not just about product management. Any leadership role requires you to be able to influence. And since commanding is easier than influencing, influencing will take a lot of your time and energy, right? And generally, people want to default to the former, which means that most of us, if we can, would say, let me just, this is how it needs to be done, just do it, right? Instead of telling people why something needs to be done and why it is important and how it is going to help them meet their goals. So oftentimes young managers or people who have a specific personality type find it much easier to command and end up trying to command instead of trying to influence, right? And because influencing is a long game, the results of influencing take time to come out. Whereas because and but commanding is a short term game, you will always be able to find out how things are going and you will get the results almost immediately. And while it is gratifying, it is devastating in the long term because nobody that you work with would want to work with you, especially if they are smart and if they have a mind of their own and if they're people like you. And influencing has to be context aware, right? So, are you in a small company? Are you in a medium-sized company, or in a large company? Will determine how much of your time and energy needs to go towards influencing people. For example, micro and small companies, influencing is very easy. There are three people you have to talk to, you have to have lunch with, you have to share stories with, and it's easy. Compare that to a large company where first you have to find time with a VP, right? Get time on the calendar. Let's say you get half an hour, they show up 5 minutes late, they need to leave 5 minutes early. So you have 20 minutes to get them to care about what you're talking about and then get them to commit. And that's hard to do. And it will not happen in that 20-minute meeting. That only happens if you have an existing relationship with that customer, with that person, and if you have spent the time cultivating and building a relationship with these people, so that in that 20-minute meeting you can express, you can understand where they're coming from, you can hear them, and then tell them how you're going to address their concerns, right? It is not for you to go in and just talk the hell out of them. It is for you to go and listen to them and then to address their concerns. And influencing style is very culture driven also. So Indian companies work differently than American companies, than European companies. So as you move into different companies, take the time to understand the culture of that company before you try to influence or command people or try to lead. One of the key problems I see with young graduates is that they try to lead too early, and don't do that. Take the time to understand what is the power map of this organization and how can I be somebody who gets extremely, competent at navigating this power map, and how can I as a person drive new initiatives in this company. One of the best ways to do that is to look at how people who are driving new initiatives in a company are doing uh, their work, right? What is it that is able to get them to succeed? And can you compare and contrast their way of working against people whose initiatives are not getting approved? That is a great way to understand what works and what doesn't work in a company. And then you can decide, is this the game you want to play, or do you want to build your own company, or do you want to work in a different company? All those questions will come up once you realize what is the style and culture of the company that you're going to work for. So there's a lot to read on this slide, but there are key tactics and traits to influencing people, right? There, you have to, for you to influence somebody, you have to have some credibility. And credibility comes only if you are an expert in an area, or you have done the work to become an expert, or you've read enough to know, or you have used the product, for example. Uh, you know how to use the product as an expert. You will then slowly get the respect that you need to be able to influence people. I'll give you an example. When I joined Adobe as a program manager, I was working on a product called Adobe Media Encoder, and I had just come from the US. Nobody, gave a shit about me, and I had no credibility in the organization. The first thing I did in that role was I used the product. I used it every day, and I filed bugs. I worked as a QE on top of my project management role, and I filed a lot of bugs. So the QE managers found out that, oh, Anubhav can file bugs, and he's filing good bugs. He's reporting issues. He cares about the product, and he is complicit in the success of this product, and he is tying his or her individual success to the success of the product. That you as an individual have shared goals with the people you want to influence is the surest way to get them to work with you. And for that to happen, you have to demonstrate that you are not somebody who wants to succeed individually. One of the things I tell many people on the Illustrator team, which is the team that I work on, is that there are no individual successes on the Illustrator team. We succeed together and we fail together. And I care a lot about the product. I will go to bat for the product. I will fight for the product. I will fight for the team. And once people see that, they know that I have their back, and they know that, and I know that they will have my back, right? And that happens only because they know that I am an expert in the product, and I care deeply about the product, and I care about the success of the product team and their individual success, which goes to say that I understand my audience and I have a strategy to understand their goals. I know the power map in the organization, and I've built enough relationships and connections to leverage them for influencing activities later on, right? This is not done in any malevolent way. This is done in a very authentic manner. I honestly do care about Illustrator. I think if Illustrator doesn't succeed, then I, as a senior director of product management on Illustrator, I'm not going to succeed. And I know who are the key people on Illustrator, and I meet with all of them. I meet with all of them once a week. I know they can amplify what we want to achieve as a product team, not what I want to achieve. They can amplify what we want to achieve as a product team. They have, in many cases, better ideas than me, and they will not share those ideas if I move into a command and control leadership style, right? So for me to get the best out of the team, the best ideas out of the team, and get them implemented with high quality, I have to make sure that I nurture relationships with key people in the organization. Obviously, I can't meet with all 120 people for half an hour every week. Otherwise, I'll have no time to do anything. But who are the 15, 20 people? It's always more than the number you think, right? It's if you think, oh, there are only 5 people who have influence, chances are there'll be 8, right? So it takes a lot of relationship building, takes a lot of listening for you to understand where they are coming from, what is important to them, what do they care about, right? If, for example, a key engineer on your team cares about the next machine learning based algorithm that we need to implement in the product, right? You have to understand why is that important to that person, and how do you make sure that that shows up in a product in a way that is useful to the customer. And throughout all of these relationship building meetings, you have to manage your posture and you have to manage your words. Words and posture are very, very important. They are things that people hear and latch onto. In many interviews, you will get rejected if you use the term I a lot, right? Especially as you move through uh, your career, as you interview for positions that require more experience and more leadership. If they, if I hear somebody keep saying the word, "Oh, I did this, I did that, I did this," I know they're probably not a people manager. They are probably they may be a great individual contributor, and that is okay. But if they are interviewing for a people management role, I would, what I really want to hear is my team and this great person on my team. I have this great person on my team. That's what I want to hear. And I want them to back it up and say, why is that person great? And what did you do to help that person become greater? Right. So those things are supremely important. And what is most important and what most Indians suck at today is telling a story. And I'll speak more about that a little bit later. So if you are going to join a new organization, just make sure you do these 7 things before you start thinking about influencing, right? You start building a rapport with the team. Building a rapport will require you to be available to the team, to be available on the phone, to be available on video, to be available on email, to be available for consultation when they need you, not then when you need them. You will have to listen actively and understand what is the current mental model for each of the people that you talk to. What is it that they care about? What is it that they're good at? What is it that they would like to see happen? You also have to use the time early on in your career or in the first month of being in a company to ask all the dumb questions that you want to ask, because chances are that the questions that you're not asking are not dumb, they're just uncomfortable and people don't ask them. And you and as a new person you should be asking all those questions to understand what is it that the organization doesn't want to talk about, right? And you have to do all of that in a non-threatening manner. So you have to be careful about the words that you use and how you are standing, how are you holding your hands, right? And what are your hands doing when you're talking about things, because that gives a lot away. And when you start influencing people, you start by selling the benefits of what you're proposing. Why is this going to be beneficial? What is it that is going to lead to? And throughout all this time, you have to rely on deep rooted Indian philosophy around karma, and you have to do the work without expecting any rewards in return. So be relaxed, do the work. The rewards will come, and even if they don't come, you have to keep doing the work, right? So um, be relaxed and be prepared to invest the time that is needed to build these relationships, because that is what is going to get you to succeed in your existing role. That is what is going to unlock opportunities for you within a large company to move into a different role or to unlock the next role for you in your career. And this is a little bit theoretical, but there are 3 appeals that you're doing in any influencing conversation. You're either appealing to the head through rational, data driven uh, conversation and arguments. This is what most engineers and most MBAs are taught to do, right? Uh, where is the data? Show me the data. We trust God, but everybody else brings data, right? So this is all typical Indian way of arguments, and they don't work, right? This is only 33% at best of any influencing strategy. Heart, appealing to the heart and appealing to emotions. This is something that designers do really well. People in fine arts, people in graphic design, people in sometimes in UI UX design do a great job. Marketers do a great job of appealing to emotions. Copywriters do a great job of appealing to emotions. And throughout our lives, we've been taught to discount these roles. These roles don't make money. What is in design? This is fluff. There is many answers to the same question, and I like science, and There is only one right answer and all that stuff. We have years of training and bias against appealing to emotions, but you are just as susceptible to emotions as anybody else, even though you may have a training in science and management and finance and spreadsheets. You're still buying potato chips and samosas and appealing to, your emotions, things that are appealing to your emotions, or acting to the multiple um, exposures that you've had to a particular ad, so that your consumption decisions get driven largely through your heart. Most most influencing decisions that are vision driven, that speak to a brighter future or that speak to a different future, are not going to be driven by data. They're going to be driven by emotion. Nobody is telling you how to talk with emotion. Nobody is teaching you what language do you need to use, what props, what presentation designs speak to the heart, and nobody's telling you how much time you need to spend in understanding the audience and understanding what do they want. Do they want a data driven argument? Do they want a emotion driven argument? And or do they want a participatory call to action, and let's do it together, let's partner and make this successful. And many times you're going to be in meetings where there will be all three types of stakeholders. So you as the presenter has to be able to connect emotionally, connect with data, and ask for help and partnership in the same meeting. And for you to do that, you have to be very, very good at listening, extremely good at listening, not very good at talking, right? Obviously, it helps to be good at talking, but first, unless you get good at listening, you won't even know what to say, even if you were good at talking. So I would love for you to read a book. It's called Stories at Work. It's a book by Indranil Chakravarti, IC. He talks about, four different kinds of stories at work. There is a connection story, there's an influence story, a clarity story, and a success story. And these stories are how you influence. The work of any leader is to tell stories and to paint a picture for what the future can be, and then ask for participation in building that future, right? And there are stories that help you connect with people, and then there are stories that acknowledge what are the problems that we need to address, right? There are stories that you need to tell to combat other stories. These are called anti stories, because there may be a story in an organization that you go to which says, oh yeah, we tried that didn't work. You need an anti story to address that story. There are clarity stories that explain how everybody who is opposing you on a certain initiative is not looking at things the right way. It's not that they're dumb. You never ever say that, right? You always say they have a different context. They believe something different about the present or the future than you do. And your goal is to question the beliefs that they're holding, then their competence. Most of the time, we end up questioning people's competence, and that is just typical, argumentative Indian crap. Never question people's competence, question people's beliefs and mental models. Ask them how did they come to that conclusion? What makes them believe what they believe? That'll tell you a lot more about that person and hopefully help you build a story to address their worldview and help them see the world a little bit differently. The second book I want you to read is Psychology, The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. He is, everybody's read this book. So if you haven't read this book, you should read this book, right? It has some shortcuts to influencing and connecting with people, but overall, it's a great use of your time. It's a great investment of your time. And if you are not a reader, please watch this video. It's a simple video by Robert Cialdini's team. It's a 20-minute video, which I will not play in this presentation, but I will share the presentation with all of you, and you can watch it when you have time. It's an easy to watch video. People are sketching, so you keep watching, and they've done a good job. And then, sorry, this is the video. It's going to play, but I'm going to skip it. And then influence is also about negotiation. One of the books that I really enjoyed was a book called Getting More by Stuart Diamond. It tells you, it gives you scripts to negotiate with people. And it tells you how you might be able to get more than what you're getting today, right? And you can use these skills for negotiating a promotion, negotiating your salary, negotiating your telephone bill, negotiating with your girlfriend, boyfriend, or your gender of choice. You can also use this book to grow in your career, because it helps you ask the right questions, and it helps you structure your questions in a way that will unlock many doors that you believe are closed for you today. So I can share a few true stories, but I think it's a good time to stop and take questions. What is the time?
So it's 11:40.
11:40.
Yeah.
So we have 20 minutes, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Do we want any more questions? Let me take a few questions and then I'll talk, because if I keep talking, then many of you will start, going on Instagram or WhatsApp, or start doing your homework, or looking for the next opportunity. So let me stop and just take some questions. What is
Sure.
the right way to take questions? Will people just unmute and ask, or are they sending questions to you?
They'll unmute themselves and they can ask a question if they have.
Okay.
Hi, sir. Good morning. Abhinav, can I go with the question?
Sure, sure.
Good morning, sir. Sir, this is Sandeep Kaja from PGP Batch 2022. Sir, can I go with the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Please.
people say the first manager in our life is very influential, and he's one of the important parts of our professional career going, in the days to see. So what is that in your case? What's the influence of your first manager in your life?
Zero. I think this is, I don't believe in it. I don't think the first manager has anything to do with your career. You're going to have many managers. You have to learn how to manage your manager. You have to get, the way to manage your manager is to have conversations every quarter or every month on how you are doing, right? To understand the language of your manager, to understand their expectations, and then to make sure that your work is meeting or exceeding expectations. You don't want to hear that you're not meeting expectations at the end of the year. You want to know quickly. You also want to get feedback on your work from lots of other people so that you can get better. A lot of us believe that after an MBA we know everything, but I hope that all of you know that if there is one thing that an MBA teaches you, is that you don't know much, that there is so much to learn, right? Similarly, there is a lot that you have to learn about yourself, how you show up. Do people find you aggressive by default, even though you might not be an aggressive person? Are you conveying a certain emotion when you talk that you do not intend to? All those conversations, uh, and that feedback will help you shine a light on your blind spots, and be very, very open to feedback and coaching. But for you, going back to your question, the best way to work with a new manager or your new manager is to find out about them and find out about how you think you are doing with them. Most managers are busy, but they will respond to people who are asking for feedback and are showing that they're listening. So manage your manager.
Thank you, sir.
May I go next?
Yeah, go ahead, Devanshi, and then Ribhu raised his hand, so Ribhu can go after you.
Okay. Sir, my question is, as you just said that, people will give us feedback and they'll try to tell us what pointers we can use to make ourselves better, how we can be perceived better. But sometimes it can become difficult to differentiate between constructive criticism and something that's just essentially taking our essence out of us, making us like a rat in a machine or something. How do we separate that from constructive
So
criticism?
tell me more about rat in the machine. What, like a hamster in a wheel? Is that the analogy that you were going for? What, tell me
I
more about.
couldn't get the words together. I think I mixed
So,
metaphors. Basically,
no,
just not getting into a rat race and becoming some kind of a prototype or some kind of uh, you know, a custom, sorry, I mean, an assembly line thing, just being the same as every other guy.
so it depends on what type of a job you end up in. I think what you're saying, Devanshi, is you want a job that rewards creativity. You
Yeah.
want a job that allows you to be who you are. You care about those things. I want to say that there are very few companies who care about any of that, frankly. But there are many more than there were a few years ago, right? Both the Me Too movement as well as the empowerment of women movements have and the drive for diversity in hiring has helped companies see a lot of value in letting people be who they are. And uh, for that to so I think you're entering a workforce at a great time. There's a lot of promise and a lot of openness to you know creativity and the value of creativity and the value of design in companies today. One thing I would say is the other thing that you're not asking, but I think you are probably uh, which you should be asking is about a personal brand, like who is Devanshi,
A
and
USP, yeah.
right. And what does she stand for? What is her work ethic? Is she reliable? Does she show up on time? Is she punctual? Does she do what she says she's going to do? Is she bringing new insights to the work that she is doing? Right? Is she reading? Is she learning new things? What is her USP or her brand? Right? Similarly, all of you will hopefully get the time to discover yourself, because my fear with most of you is that most of you have been in this race for too long, and the only thing you know is how to race and how to be better than somebody else at the same thing, whereas the world is full of possibilities, and all of you can be great at the same time. All of you can get a 10 on 10 CGPA, but nobody tells you that, right? And for you to do that, be you have to build your own brand. You have to be known for something in the jobs that you're going to uh, do. You might be known for great presentations. You may be known for great speaking skills. I hope all of you learn how to tell stories. I hope you spend a lot of time listening to stories and you figure out how to tell stories at work. It is extremely important. That is the only way you're going to succeed. Next question.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir. Uh, so, in continuation to where you had ended, that we all need to develop a way and understand how to tell stories. But these things do not come overnight, right? So even the topics that we talked about, how to influence people, these habits do not come overnight. So my question is kind of regarding what kind of habits do we indulge towards to develop these things, to develop a hunch towards telling the story, to develop, to bringing in that vision into our data analysis mind frame.
So I'll tell you a couple of things that have worked for me, and then you will sort of choose your own adventure. But writing, when I was growing up, I thought this writing and speaking, this is all crap. Logical thinking, and being able to, solve trigonometry problems and being able to solve Fourier transforms and Laplace transforms. This is where true skill is. And, solving those stupid questions on, there are people on a round table and X is sitting to the right of Y and Z is sitting in front of this person. If you're good at that, then you are gold, right? You're solid. This is exactly the kind of person I want to hire. Somebody who can tell me why main hole covers are round. I don't give a shit about why main hole covers are round, right? What I care about is how you think and how you communicate, and what are you doing to get better at those things. So if there are things that you want to get better at, you have to make it a project and say, I want to get better at writing. I want to get better at language. I want to get better at talking. And where are the opportunities to do that? You can write today for free. You can, like I have my blog on Substack, pmtalk.substack.com. You can start writing yourself, right? And if you are not confident that your writing is good for anything, I can guarantee it's not going to be good for anything if you don't write. So write, write for yourself, because in any large organization, for your influence to multiply, your message has to be understood and be shareable without you. So you have to know how to write, you have to know how to talk, you have to find opportunities to write and talk and fail, right? So join societies, join clubs, join groups and meetups where people are talking. It could be Toastmasters, it could be, any debating society, it could be an MUN society, it could be, any place where you can talk uh, would be much better than watching videos on talking, right? I think one of my biggest problems with my son is he's watching every YouTube video and he thinks he knows everything, right? And I don't think you learn a lot by watching, you learn by active participation. So wherever you can be active and wherever you can actively, so writing is something you must do. You also have to read stories at work. How did somebody influence people? What is the story that they were telling? What is the promise that was being made in this story? What is the conflict in this story? Who are the protagonists in that story? Are extremely important. Another way to build storytelling is to skills is to read movie scripts or books on movie scripts. There's a great book called Save the Cat. It talks about how to structure a movie script, right? There is the many books on script writing that you can read that tell you how to structure a story. And there are redemptive stories, and redemptive stories do really well. So think about reading those and structuring those. And even in your assignments, where there is time, I know that there's just not enough time to tell a story, but if you can, in your crew, in your group work, try to tell a story around a project that you do. And humans over data, bring people and emotion over data, because you'll always be able to get data. I think we are pretty good at getting data into the picture. So I don't worry about that. Next question.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, sir. This is Shambhavi Dubey, PGP Bash 2022. Sir, what I understood from your presentation up till now is that as a product manager, we are responsible for a product from its genesis up till it reaches a peak, or maybe there is some sort of product extension. So, sir, how to be in the shoes of a customer? Like you said, that we have to come up with the user journey and we have to really empathize. What I understood, empathize with the customer. So, how to be in the shoes of a customer without getting influenced by our own core values and prejudices that we have, and at the same time keep that element of uniqueness alive that we get onto the table whenever we come up with something new.
I think the question largely is around listening and in formulating questions. People in anthropology and UX research are much better at it than MBAs, right? So what you need to do is to watch some videos on how to conduct a customer interview. There is a great person called Steve Blank. Steve Blank did a lot of uh, videos on how to conduct product validation interviews and customer interviews. I think as a product manager, I wish there were more Steve Blanks who were teaching our MBA students how to talk to customers. You do not want to ask leading questions. You do not want to ask questions that bias the customer in any way, shape, or form. You want to ask them what they are doing and why they're doing things. What are their do goals? What are their be goals? What do they want to be? What do they want to do? To understand their motivations. These are just things that nobody's teaching in MBA schools because these are generally, psychology, anthropology, and UX research skills. So, watch UX researchers, watch, anthropologists talk to people, watch how they ask questions, even though they know a lot about the product and the domain, they do not come in trying to impress the customer with their knowledge, which I did a lot in my in my early part of my career, where I said, "Oh, this is how you should do this. I mean, you press this button and this button, and you should be able to do this." But the fact is, they don't want to, or it's too hard to figure out, and we have not done a good job. So, as you engage with customers, it's very important to ask the right questions, to have a plan, a structured plan for customer interviews. Most of in my early career, customer interviews were just find any customer that you can talk to and just talk to them. But today we do much more structured customer interviews. We have a research plan. What do we want to find out? What are the goals of talking to a customer? Which customers do I want to talk to? What segment are they uh, in? If you're in a working for a large product that is used by many segments, you have to be sure that you're talking to the right segment of customers. So you spend as much time on recruiting the right customers as you do in writing the research plan, and you spend a lot less time on the conversation itself. Your conversation is 1 hour, but you spend at least 6 hours writing the research plan. How many customers you're going to talk to, which segment of customers you're going to talk to, how are you going to talk to them, what are you going to ask them. It's almost like interviewing somebody for a role out of an IIM, right? Most people will go in and just ask willy-nilly questions and don't have a structured approach to interviewing. I hope you're not one of those people.
Thank you, sir.
Next question.
Good morning, sir. Sir, I am Aditya Gai, PGP Batch 2022. Sir, my question is, while influencing a team, suppose there are 1 or 2 people on whom this approach may not work. So in such cases, do we resort to authority, or what shall we do?
That should always be the last resort. See, you're already defaulting to what is easier, right? Try not to do that. Try to spend time understanding why is it that they're pushing back. Assume that people are not there to make your life hell, right? That is not their job. They don't get a lot of thrill out of it. There is a reason why they believe something is true. So try to find out why do people believe something, and then see is there a way to help them see your point of view, but make sure you see their point of view first. Chances are that they are pushing back either because you haven't given them enough time to do the things that you want to be done. They're worried about the quality. They are worried about the product, or they're worried about the outcome, and they are seeing things that you're not seeing. Sometimes it could just be that they don't think we have the capability in the team to do what you're asking them to do, or what you believe needs to be done. And the only way you will know that is if you ask them why do they think something is true. And the worst thing is that an incapable team tries to take on something that they don't know how to do, and they keep failing at it, right? It's much better to know that these are skills that we need to learn and that things are going to take more time. And or we need to bring in new talent, whatever it is. Your job is to figure out why is it that people are resisting the idea, right? And don't take it personally. It's generally people are not out to make your life hell. They just believe your idea is not the best. It's not that you are not the best. Your idea at this time, at this stage in your career, is not as well thought through as they would like it to be. What else? Any other questions?
Good morning, sir. This is Ayush Agarwal, PG batch 2022. Hello.
Hi.
Hello. So my question is, there is a lot of time there is a lot of biasness in a corporate space in terms of academic background, in terms of what kind of role do you have. So how can one ensure that it doesn't get in their way while they're trying to pursue this art of influencing people?
Just do a good job. Don't believe what people want to believe about you, right? So I don't know. Maybe before I answer that, tell me more about what kind of bias and academic qualification bias are you talking about?
It can be in terms of college, whether one belongs to a particular tier one, tier two college, or it can be in terms of role as well, that this person doesn't have the competency level as to what he's suggesting in the corporate space or a corporate office setting. So a lot of times people perceive that his or her idea might not be at the same level, might not be as good, and they just reject it outright. So
Have you seen this, or you're just making all this shit up?
this is what I perceive that might happen because of many different factors. Sir.
So Ayush, don't. It's not a constructive way to think, right? Maybe this is true in some organizations. I hope you avoid those organizations. But what I can tell you is believing that that is how the world works is not going to help you succeed. There are far more people who succeed because they believe in themselves, because they are confident that they will outwork and let's just say outwork and deliver on their promises. 90% of people do not do what they say they were going to do, right? All of us at some point in time have said, oh, I want to lose weight, 5 kgs in the next 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. We don't do what we say we are going to do. We still end up eating that samosa or that kachori, right? Because we think, yeah, koi baat nahi, ho jayega. Be the person who says what they're going to do. That is 90% of the job. The second job is to keep getting better at whatever you are doing. Third is to, play to your strengths, right? Fourth is to expose yourself to contrary thinking and difficult conversations so that you can build the muscle to have these conversations. It is absolutely detrimental to believe that, oh, because I'm not from an IIT or I'm not from the best IIM, I'm not, I'm not going to be taken seriously, because that is just a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the more you think that that is how the world works, the more the world will start looking that way to you. You will find ways to validate what you believe to be true, because that our mind is very good at that. Our mind is very good at explaining random events as if they were completely designed, right? Uh, Many random things happen. I've never received, I've never gotten anything I wanted in the first go. When I applied for University of Texas, I got rejected by University of Dallas, which is a lower ranked university. When I applied for Adobe as a software developer, I got rejected. When I applied for Adobe as a product manager, I got rejected. When I applied to when I applied for I am Lucknow's part-time MBA, I got rejected. Then I applied again. So every place I had to apply twice, right? Uh, and it's okay. You just have to keep doing what you need to do. Karm karo, phal ki chinta mat karo. But keep doing a better job, right? Keep getting better and better, and introspect, figure out where is it that you are falling short, put the onus of responsibility on you and not on this world that sucks. Most of us are prone to thinking that the world is conspiring against us. Everyone is against us because I didn't get into an IIT or I didn't get into IIM Ahmedabad, right? The fact of the matter is we just don't have enough good engineering colleges and we don't have enough good management colleges. So we, our children and people like you, our young people, are wasting their time studying so hard for an exam with a ridiculous chance of success, right? There is no reason why you should have toiled so much to get an MBA degree. There's no reason anybody should toil so hard to get a stupid engineering degree from an IIT, even when you're not going to be an engineer after some time, right? It is much, much easier. It is 10 times more easier to get into any of the best engineering colleges in the world than to get into the colleges that we have in India, right? And who pays the cost of it? The students pay the cost of it, right? So for you to believe that you're less than anybody else is absolutely bonkers. Do not entertain that thought. You are just by accident of birth born in a country where somehow we have this system where everybody's supposed to work the hell out of give up their childhood, do not make friends, do not become rounded individuals and solve the, sorry, I'm getting a little more angrier as I'm speaking through this, but I mean, I'm very passionate about this topic. This is why I started Beyond IIT, right? Because I believe there are many paths to success. And with Beyond IIT and hopefully Beyond IIM in a few years, I'll be able to share more success stories of people who have been successful by any stretch of imagination, right? Without these prestigious degrees. And there is no, you already have an IIM degree. So for you all to think this way is just absolutely ridiculous. Do not entertain that thought. It is not your lack of capability. It is the lack of capability of our government, of our society, that we've not been able to provide easier paths to these degrees to our population.
Thank you, sir.
Next question.
So I believe we have a few more slides left, so we can pause on the questions right now and then take it at the end of the PPT.
Okay, so I've had many successes and failures. I spoke about sort of my not getting anything in the first try failures, but there are many stories I tried to tell very early in my career, right? And 6 years into Adobe, I was trying to sell a new idea, right, out of India in a company headquartered in the US. It didn't work. But then it worked again when I partnered with somebody who was in the US telling that story. Adobe Story was another product which we made for script writers. That's where I learned the power of story and how, I met with so many script writers. I set up customer meetings. I took the initiative to figure out what do we need to build for this product to succeed, etc., etc. And the product didn't succeed. We made a B2B product that very few people bought, but the people who bought loved them, but it was never going to scale to the level that Adobe wanted it to scale. So I moved on to a different product. I moved to Illustrator. I tried to get Illustrator built on the iPad in 2015. I couldn't tell the story correctly. In 2016, I couldn't tell the story correctly. In 2018, I was able to explain why this makes sense, and it happened largely because I partnered with people who were closer to the decision makers, and I got them to tell my story in their words because they had more of a contact with the people who were making decisions than I did, right? So instead of just banging my head against the wall, I became very unattached to the outcome, and I started to partner with more people and said, I think we can do this. This is how we can do this. What do you think? How can we make it better? I asked for their input. I made it their idea, and we got it through. And it's not like if you get one success, everything else that you're going to pitch is going to be successful. Project Wick, which is another idea that I was pitching at Adobe to help marketers create content at scale. Imagine you create a single graphic and then you can send it to Instagram and Facebook without having to redesign it because the formats are different, right? It didn't make it didn't make it. So you shouldn't get bogged down if your first 5 pitches don't succeed, right? Hopefully you keep getting better at pitching, right? Somebody gets out on the first ball doesn't mean you're a bad batsman, right? It means you have to go back and go bat again and keep batting. And if you keep batting and keep facing these balls, you will hopefully get better, right? So always take the opportunity to bat, because that is the only way you're going to become a batsman. And same thing with public speaking, same thing with any skill that you want to emulate. Start doing it, and in the process of doing it, you're going to get better. That's it. So there are a bunch of other references that I have in this deck. I would encourage all of you to go through them and reach out to me if you have anything. You can reach me on beyondiit.com or pmtalk.substack.com, pmtalk.substack.com, where I post what I'm thinking. And if there are things you want me to write about, if there are things you want to learn more about, please let me know, and I'd be happy to help. That's it. That is the scheduled part of the presentation. Anything else that you want me to talk to? I think we have another maybe 2 minutes. No, we are over time, right?
Yeah, we're over time by 10 minutes, but I think there were two more students who wanted to ask a few questions, if that is okay, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess Ananta had a question. She had raised her hand. Ananta Mithil. Yeah, Ananta, can you unmute? We're not able to hear you. All right, I think you also had Akash Verma.
Yes, sir. Hello, sir. My name is Akash Verma, and my question to you is that you started your career from a very basic level in year around 2000, and around year 2017 you reached to the position of a director. So, what was your mindset within those 17 years? How difficult was it for you? Because I have seen many people reaching the plateau within 5 to 7 years of their career.
Everybody's going to reach a plateau. You can say that I'm at a plateau. Getting a director position is not the end of the world. I think this is somebody has told us that these positions define our worth in life. I would encourage all of you to not think that way, because everybody's context is going to be different. What is successful for you is going to be very different than what is success for somebody else. So define your own milestones. Do not get attached to these titles, because you can get a VP title at a job in a bank today, right? They start from vice presidents, right? And in software companies, directors are still 5 level below CEOs and VPs. So I wouldn't say I'm very successful. I think the chief product officer of Adobe is probably as old as I am. I think the chief technology officer of Adobe is maybe a year older than I am. So I can look at them and say, oh my God, I'm such a failure. Look at me. I haven't achieved anything in my life, right? So there's always somebody you can look up. You can always look up and say, oh, my life sucks and I haven't achieved anything. I would encourage you to look down. There is a great book called wow, I'm completely blanking. This shows how old I am. I can't even recall the name of this book, but there's an amazing book by Mo Gaudet. He used to work at Google, and he wrote this book about philosophy and life and how to live. And one of the things he talks about is to look down, look at the people who've not been able to achieve all the things that you've already been able to achieve, right? And do The only thing you need to do is to keep getting better than who you are today. That should be your only goal. And everything else is an outcome that may or may not happen, right? The world is full of random events. Some of you are going to get extremely lucky and join a startup that is going to go public in 2 to 3 years, and you'll make a lot of money and you'll feel good about the money, right? Some of you are going to deal with very difficult life events. There will be deaths in the family. There will be people who move away. There will be relationships that may not work out, and you will have a different trajectory uh, in your career because they are more important things for you to deal with. Some of us will have health issues. Some of our parents will have health issues. They will take a priority over your career. I hope they do, right? And it is absolutely okay to prioritize different things in different parts of your life. You have all been on a treadmill. You've been running, running, and running. You have to think about, do you want to keep running? If yes, to what end? There are only three things in life you have to optimize: health, time, and money. It doesn't happen that you have health, time, and money together, right? When you're young, you don't have money, you have a lot of time and health. When you get older, you don't have health, maybe you have money and you have a little bit of time, right? And then when you're much older, you have a lot of time and you're now worried about retirement and you don't have health. So when you have time, money, and health, do the things that you want to do, because life is too short, as COVID has taught all of us, right? Chasing goals and getting happiness out of goals is not going to be a path to happiness. Read about Indian philosophy. Indian philosophy has a lot to teach us, and it has taken me many years to come back to Indian philosophy. It is not religion, it is philosophy. You can read Indian philosophy no matter what God you believe in or don't believe in, but do not tie your happiness to outcomes. Enjoy the journey. Your life is a software project. It is never done. You can always fix bugs in your software. You will always be fixing bugs. So you should enjoy the journey and not the outcome alone. Otherwise, you are going to live a miserable life. You will lead a miserable life. People around you will be miserable. You have to find the time to enjoy the money that you have, enjoy the health that you have, and do not look up, look down, look at people who have less than you. uh, do not aspire to be Bill Gates. There are many happy accidents that need to happen for you to be Bill Gates, but all of those accidents are forgotten, and we want to worship people, right? We want to worship people who are successful. We do not want to acknowledge the role of luck and chance in our lives. I think there has been a role of luck and chance in all of our lives already. And the more you recognize that, the better people, the better person you're going to be, the more empathetic you're going to be, and the richer life you're going to lead. Sorry, that was a lot of philosophy. I don't know if you signed up for Gyan. That
Thank you,
was
sir.
not in the on the agenda, but if that's what you want to ask, it's fine. Any other questions?
Maybe one last time. Ananta, can you try unmuting?
She's having some issues, I think.
I guess so. I think she has unmuted, but we're not able to hear you, Ananta. All right, I think maybe Kansala
Can
Darshak had a question.
Yes, Abhinav. So should I go ahead with the question?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So basically, I would like to ask the question based on the base of customer mindset. Actually, you said at the starting that the typical Indian mindset would not work anymore. So you have background from the both regions, India as well as the US. So what is the current mindset that is driving the customer, the product purchase? It is only the quality, it is only the story, or it is a mix of both, and how would it change over the time? So,
I don't know how to answer that question, frankly. I don't know what the question is. I think maybe you're asking, what do people value today? I think that's
Yes.
a very personal and very segmented question. There is no single answer to that question, right? There are people who value customer experience, and I think in a lot of the products in India, attention to customer experience is increasing, right? But there are other people who value for money more than anything else, right? That is our default mindset, right? Generally, we all want value for money, right? When you were paying your IM fees, you were thinking about, is this value for money or not, right? So um, everybody's different. I hope you do not talk in terms of generalities. When you ask questions like what do customers want, you should also ask what type of customer am I talking about? What segment of customer am I talking about? That will lead to better answers.
Okay. Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hello.
Hi.
Good afternoon, sir. So this is Gopal Shikarma from PG Batch 2022. So I wanted to ask that you mentioned somewhere that you need to influence, not to command people. So, but do you think that like in case if a situation comes where the quality of work is getting affected by just because you are not commanding and you're influencing your peers, so what do you think that in this case should be given the priority? Like, is it the quality of the work, or you still need to maintain that whatever you told of influencing art?
It depends what role you are in, right? If you're a product manager, you will probably ask the quality manager what is going on, right? And it's a fair question to ask. The idea behind influencing is not to shy away from asking the hard questions. You have to ask the hard questions, right? And it doesn't mean not holding the team accountable for a high standard of work, right? But all I'm cautioning against is don't just always default to commanding people to do something, because that is not going to lead to success. Especially when it comes to vision and when it comes to influencing. This is not even an influence question, right? If the quality of the product is suffering, this is a very tactical thing that you have to do. So address it. Anything else?
I guess that is all the time we had today, sir. We'll restrict the questions for now. Yes,
Great. And are you going to share the recording with everyone? Or
yes,
how is-
I'll share a drive link with you, sir, over mail of the recording. I'll upload it to a drive and I'll share it across.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you for listening to me so patiently. I hope this was useful. I wish you the best in your careers. I hope you all do uh, most of the right things. Some of you are going to do the wrong things also, but go back and start doing the right things. If you catch yourself doing wrong, it's okay. So long as you can fix it. We are all human, so we are allowed a few mistakes. So um, be understanding of yourself, be patient with yourself, and look down. ठीक है, enjoy. Bye.
Thank you, sir.